Herold's Walk. This was a game that I got an email about just yesterday by someone named Luke Vincent. And my initial response to all that was, why does that sound so familiar to me? Oh yeah! He's the guy that did that other thing I talked about a couple weeks ago and really liked. And since I don't say no to a free game, here we are playing it. Now, it's worth knowing that this game is in a pre-release state. It's actually not launching until July 15th, and as such, there are some issues. And the developer themselves acknowledges this. For one thing, they even mentioned that they're gonna fix the endings so that they're a lot more satisfying. And so I have no guilt showing you the ending for collecting all the collectibles. It's this. So the idea of going back and fixing this so it's satisfying, probably the right move. But because this is a beta build, everything I'm about to talk about is probably subject to change. However, I can't really talk about things that aren't existent yet. I have to talk about things in the now timey bits. So I'm going to talk about the things in the now timey bits that were the then timey bits as of like 2 seconds ago. 3, 4. And we just missed the now timey bits. You know, when I started this whole statement, I wasn't planning on making a Spaceballs joke, but I guess that's the power of Rick Moranis and the greatest Star Wars film of all time. Either way, Herold's Walk is another one of those Phoenix 3DS games. Like his previous Automaton Lung, it is a game that was on the 3DS, died, and is now back on Steam. And I've not played the original version, but based on something I read on GameFAQs, it seems like calling this a port isn't really accurate, because it seems like the 3DS version had about 30 main collectibles. This one has substantially more. I mean, I only am working with half-broken context to really understand what the original game was, but from what I can tell, this is more a completely brand new game that just has levels and some collectibles from the first game. So if you've played the original Herold's Walk, you might want to go back and check this one out because it is, from what I can tell, a substantially bigger game. Now, similar to Automaton Lung, the plot to Herold's Walk is a bit, kind of what you make of it, although there's kind of a lot less going on here too, so it's a little bit trickier to work with. You play as this guy. Ostensibly, I would say his name is Herold, both because there's a giant statue in a level called the Statue of Herold that looks kind of like this guy, and also because he has a shirt that says H on it. Either way, Herold decides to go walkabout. He starts in a castle and he's wandering around and there's suddenly a giant pair of legs with some kind of rock butt with a cyclopean eye chasing him, and he can kill it, fortunately. He can wander around and collect these purple donut things that are gonna look pink because I genuinely think my recording device is dying and my TV showed purple but my recording device shows bright pink. I had this problem with Omori as well. I'm gonna have to replace a whole bunch of equipment I can't possibly afford. So yeah, if it looks bright pink, just know it's kind of purpley or something is wrong on my end. But these donuts are called bites. He can collect a lot of them. Yeah, and by that I mean 300 of them. And when you do, they, well, either way, he can wander around and collect a bunch of random crowns on each stage because the one he has on his head isn't enough. He needs one for every single day of the year. Except he won't get anywhere near that many. There's about 100. But when he gets to the top of the tower, he sees this weird portal thing. And he can jump inside, and then suddenly he's transported to Outcast. Just, you know, stay out of the water, Ulikai. I hear there's a Gorgor about. And, you know, if you go in the water, you just straight up die. This world's kind of interesting because, similarly, there are bites and crowns, but now there's 2 portals. One seemingly white, the other red, on opposite sides of the map. Now you might be asking, what's the difference between these portals? That's a good question. I've been through both, and as far as I can tell, they just take you to different places. This kind of reminds me a lot of Umehara Kawase in the sense that every area would have multiple exits, and you needed to go through these portals to see different parts of a giant maze. I'm not sure I'd say that this game is necessarily a giant maze so much as it feels like a larger series of rooms just sort of interconnected, but you can go to different places through different teleporters. Some teleporters are sort of like shortcuts through the series and progression of areas, Weirdly enough, there's 2 areas that are connected not through a maze, but through a tunnel you can just walk through, and for some reason the game just decides to completely throw its own mechanics out of the window. Like, you can go through portals in that stage too, but there's just a tunnel you can walk through to get to the other level for some reason. The end result is that you are trying to collect these crowns and bites to go through these teleporters to find further teleporters to... I'm not really sure, honestly. Like, there's about 3 teleporters in the game that have firewalls around them that require a certain number of bites or crowns total, and they won't let you go through them, but you just end up going through teleporters to eventually get to some form of an ending. There are some that are more hidden. Oh, and at one point I jumped out of a computer and, guys, I think I might have killed Luke Vincent here. That might be a problem because we need more of his awesome, crazy nonsense in this world. Seriously, his games are great. And then later, Herold seems to be haunted by the ghost of Luke Vincent because there's so many just trying to stop him. And then after finally being tormented by the vengeful ghost of Luke Vincent, Herold seems to ascend to the code itself, because I guess he was a part of the computer or something. This game is a little bit all over the place in terms of what its story might actually be about. At one point there's a giant fly swatter that seemingly doesn't have a hitbox? Like, I think it's trying to chase you around this environment, but it doesn't seem to actually push you or do anything. You can jump through it, I did. I'm not sure, maybe this was a bug. And as Herold goes on walkabout, you can see his different abilities. He can walk around, he can jump, he has a roll that also doubles as an attack. You have a double jump that occasionally has sparkles attached to it, which I think makes it higher double jump. And I could not for the life of me control this consistently at all. Okay, so I have figured out how to consistently do the super sparkle jump. It's a double jump where you hold jump and roll at the same time when you initiate the double jump. But I still had trouble getting it to work sometimes. The game only really needs it once, and it's in one of the last levels of the game, and it never actually really teaches you. And for a feature that's defined by its subtle nuance, the difference between a double jump and a super jump is actually not substantially different, as seen in the stage that actually does require the super jump. They could have done a better job showing you the differences, and I guess they hope you pick up on it. So I feel like my criticism of this being rather unclear but still forced to be used in one explicit instance is still justified. I feel like they could better explain this and require you to use it somewhere early on where it's kind of more adequately taught to you, as opposed to hoping you figure it out, because I did not figure this out throughout my entire first playthrough of 100% completion. Fortunately, for the most part, the game does not ever require you to, but we'll talk about that. And from here on out, it's all about having Herold explore all these weird, disconnected, surreal landscapes, finding his way to the end of this strange maze. Again, it feels a bit like Umehara Kawase in 3D, but without the rubber fishing rod. And occasionally you'll just see computer code that you need to jump around, and it's a little bit tricky to figure out exactly what the geometry on it is. It's a pretty simple game at its core. Each stage has those bites and crowns, and you need to collect those. Eventually you'll get to the end of all the stages, and you can just find an exit that will take you to an ending that will tell you, hey, you didn't have enough stuff. Or, hooray, you had enough stuff, so you can continue. The weird thing is that while there are 3 barriers around portals that I could find that say, you need more collectibles of one flavor or another, the first one doesn't really unlock all that much. Like, it unlocks a couple of stages that would then dump you onto what I found to be the main path of the game again, so it's really just sort of an alternate path more than anything that's largely, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's certainly not as impactful as the later ones, which dump you into a much harder series of challenges at the end of the game. And, the last one is just the final secret, you collected 100% ending. This thing. It's just kind of weird that early on you have sort of a set goal to collect X number of things to open this thing up, and the end result is a little, compared to the other one, underwhelming. The stages themselves are very, very strange, very surreal. It does, in a sense, feel like a sort of sequel to Automaton Lung, although this game came out first, except there's no real coherency or consistency between the levels. Sometimes you're on a castle, other times you're on a beach, sometimes you're on computer code, sometimes you're in an upside-down world that next level you're on the right side up version of it. The world itself doesn't really have like a continuous narrative flow to it all that much. It's really more, these are just strange environments to platform around in. It seems like Herold is some kind of like computer program or bug or something running around this world, so it kind of makes sense that these are effectively just video game levels in a computer, because that's how it feels at times, but it just feels like there's sort of a lack of connectivity between those stages. They're just, oh, this is a cool idea, this is a cool idea, let's throw them together and just have them be back-to-back levels. That said, it is very, very fun to explore the world. It's always exciting to go through a portal and see what the next adventure is going to be. And what's really cool is when you've gotten to an area, regardless of completion, you can then quit out to the main menu, open up a level select, and just select any level you've been to explore the other portals to see what the other routes are. This is amazing because at any point, if you just don't want to do the next level, go take a look and see what the other path is like. See where that spreads out in the weird spider web of branching paths and teleporters leads you. It's fascinating and it's just fun to explore. And there's a wild amount of inconsistency between the levels. Some levels are like 2D basic game platforming challenges, whereas others are fully 3D, explorative, and just, here's a big room, we've thrown some collectibles and some hidden stuff in, go figure it out. And I think that's where the game is at its strongest. This definitely feels like the seed for Automaton Lunk. I love it. Now that said, there are 2 stages I didn't love so much, and they are right at the end. So let's talk about them. So near the end, you unlock the ability to go through these challenge rooms, and challenge is right. They are fairly tricky. The first one posits, how hard is it to run in a straight line? It turns out exceptionally hard. But in the penultimate challenge level 7, it's just kind of awkwardly designed, and I do not enjoy this at all. Don't get me wrong, the main level is fine, but the exit is right at the back on top of this like giant pachinko machine. Starting the climb on this isn't too bad. You've got boosters that increase your speed. You've got little bouncy trampolines that if you hit them faster, like say on a booster, you'll go even higher. But at some point the jumps get a little weird because trying to double jump your way up this thing, you'll notice that some of the pegs are just out of reach and you can't quite do it. In fact, I actually spent a lot of my time playing this game stuck on this one level. I made a point to say, okay, I can't get past this, I'm gonna go somewhere else, only to find out that this was on the critical path and that there wasn't really anything else for me to do up to this point except move through this level. I thought, well, there might be an issue with it or there's a bug or something, but no, what I think you need to do is use your like super high sparkle jumps to get up here, but I could not for the life of me find a way to get them to work consistently. I think it's a timing thing, but I never really got the timing down. And by the end, it really did just come down to me mushing my face against a wall, spamming both the jump and roll button and hoping that one of the many times I do this, I'd get a higher jump to actually get up the thing. The jumps on this one level feel fairly dodgy, and there's only 2 or 3 of those jumps in this level, but this is, as far as I can tell, the only level that required this weird higher jump. After that, the weird higher jump is never really utilized in the game ever again. The other level I have issue with is the final stage, the after part, which up to this point, you had some basic platforming challenges, some challenge mode challenges, which, you know, platform or die, and you had some explorative 3D environments, the latter of which are probably the game's strong suit, like I said. The final level decides to be one of those entirely vertical frustration platformers with no checkpoints. Like, it's a huge level that's entirely vertical, and you just have to find your way up this environment while collecting an absurd number of both crowns and bytes in order to finish the game. This is the only level in the game where I ever actually utilized the map, because there is a map here and it even shows you where the crowns and bytes are. They even show you where the boosters as well as trampolines are. Although I will say this is a bit of an issue. The trampolines on the map are color-coded to the trampolines themselves, and trampolines are the same color as bytes, so sometimes you might see like bytes as trampolines and vice versa on the map. That's a bit of an issue. But this level is just so massively huge and it's all vertical that you kind of need to use the map just to figure out where stuff is spatially. And a lot of the paths I found on this stage while I was collecting 100% of everything, because I did that over the course of the game, like it felt like most of the paths were just dead ends. And the real trick came down to figuring out exactly which way you need to go in order to actually get to the top of this thing. I did not enjoy this stage at all. It felt weird and out of place compared to the rest of the game, and it just wasn't very fun. That said, that's 2 stages out of, like, I think there's about 25 or so. So let's say 10% of the stages I didn't enjoy. That's still a net positive. There are quite a lot of awesome stages in this game if you like exploring, and they utilize the secret nooks and crannies in this game excellently. There are tons of little hidden areas where there's just a hidden byte that you need to collect if you want 100%, or that's where a crown is. And, you know, I like that. I like that it's using the 3-dimensional aspects of this world in a meaningful way. I like that it's using the secret areas and really trying to entice the explorer in you to find all these things by utilizing all these secret areas. Like, it's fun to explore these areas. It's fun to find the secret portals. It's fun to find the secret endings to the secret portals. This game was well made, and the fact is, it's a fun, weird, surreal environment to platform around in. Herold's Walk, if you're looking for a fun, weird platformer to explore, it does it, and it does it well. Now, the overall presentation to Herold's Walk is pretty well done. It has that same sort of low poly wonkiness to it that Automaton Lung had, although it feels a lot less stylish and there's a lot less coherency to it. Again, it doesn't necessarily feel like the environments are telling as much of a story as they are just environments for you to wander around in because it's a video game. That said, there's still some weird environments to look at, and there's still some weird nonsense to try and figure out what this world actually is, and that's very enjoyable. There isn't a lot of variance in enemies, in that there's one enemy. You've got the legs with a rock butt and a cyclopean eye, and that's sort of your lot, so they could use a few more enemy types and stuff, but at the same time, Herold's ability to actually deal with them is very limited, so I think adding new enemy types might be a problem. I found that the enemy placement in a couple of stages was a little bit weird. The level where you jump out of the computer, there's like a large fall that you just sort of land on, and then there's two enemies off to the side. I died there 3 times without realizing that there were enemies there. I just thought I got hit by a weird kill plane or something, but no, there's just monsters that rush you, and I just didn't see them. So I think they could be placed a little bit more meaningfully, maybe, but for one enemy type, it goes pretty far away. In fact, there's very few enemies in this game, but for the most part, for a game that's primarily about exploring 3D environments, it utilizes one enemy type pretty well. Audio-wise, similarly to Automaton Lung, it has a really awesome soundtrack. It's surreal and weird and kind of similar to Automaton Lung. If two areas are connected to one another in theme, they use a modified variation of the theme. I noticed this with the gas station and then the road in the desert. They have the exact same theme, but it's different, and that's pretty cool. It's a great soundtrack overall. And the Crown Collection sound effect? That's the same sound effect from Automaton Lung when you collect those little picture frames. That's probably just a cost-saving measure, but it made me smile. Which leads to a pretty awesome presentation for a nice little indie game. Now, if you want a copy of Herold's Walk, currently at the time of recording, it will not be out for 2 weeks, but I've been told it will be on sale for $9. It's not super expensive. In fact, it's about half the cost of Automaton Lung. That said, I'm not sure I like this game more than Automaton Lung. I feel like the way it was structured, it lost its mystique. Automaton Lung, you're dropped into this giant world that seems ever expanding and you don't know what it is unless you go to one specific area, and to be fair, I went there last without realizing it. Here, no matter where you go, you've got a set goal. Get to the teleporter and collect stuff along the way. You kind of already know what you're doing, and it's really just a bunch of weird backdrops that are tied to that, and it feels a lot less meaningful to me. But don't get me wrong, for that price, it's still a really fun little platformer. This game took me about 2 hours to complete to 100%, and that was with a little bit of frustration on that one jumping room. But it was a fun, surreal experience in a weird place. It was strange, it made me laugh at times, it made me say, "What?" more than a few times, and it's just a fun, weird game to explore that's relatively satisfying and very chill. This is a great relaxing platformer, and if you like weird, surreal environments like I do, you might want to check this one out when it comes out. Herold's Walk. Like the Phoenix, it came back after the 3DS completely got destroyed, and I'm glad because that means more people can play it, and they should.
Whoa.